Fucking fuck. Let's go. Go do meditation. Go do meditation.
I was like, man, she's not gonna be able to sit down for months.
Really?
Masturbation.
Before we wrap up, I want to get my religious frustration out. I wasn't empathizing with Hitler. Fucking fuck.
Anything you want to do, you can.
Be a professor. Wink, wink.
Clearly, you spent too much time on Pornhub.
But then now I'm kind of like, damned if I do, damned if I don't. Because now both sides sound like slavery. So then now it just sounds like there is no freedom. we're just all fucking stuck. Fucking fuck. That's it. That's how we start. I'm here with a special person. We've been trying to get on the pod for a while. And what would you like to go by? Do you want to have a code name? Or
No, Greg is good.
Greg? Alright, nice. This is Greg. So look, today Maz is not with us.
Not yet.
Well, he's alive. He's not dead. He's going to join us soon. But I thought for the time being, I can get some life advice from him. I think before we get into what we plan on talking.
Sure, Samim.
So, Brooke, this is an issue I've been having.
I'm here. I'm listening.
All of the listeners are aware of this. My parents are aware of this. My friends, my previous partners. Which is, I have this obsession with religion.
Oh.
Even though I left religion, literally I was talking to my dad the other week and I was like, I always like to, like, if I find something that proves that he's wrong, I'm like, Dad, like, like, what do you have to say about this? And then he's like, Samim, I'm religious. I like pray every day, but I don't think about it as much as you do. He's like, I don't bring it up every chance I get like you do. And I was like, this is potentially concerning. But what do you think?
Why is it concerning?
It's like an obsession. It's like keeps me up at night. Like,
Does it keep you lose sleep? Now that's a problem.
I don't lose sleep. It's like a kind of a catchphrase, but it's like I can't just let it go.
Look, if you're losing sleep over it, then you need good sleep hygiene. You need a practice to get you to sleep. Okay, but anything can do that to you. I think you are underestimating the healthiness of curiosity and passions, and even if they're weird, even if they are inexplicable, I think curiosity is one of the most important motivators of all of us. And I would encourage you to pursue your curiosity. And I wouldn't discourage this at all. I think it's entirely healthy. And yeah, religions are amazing and fascinating. I mean, in some ways, religions are like one of the most exotic expressions of human creativity. You know, that a whole group can come up with compelling mythology, cosmology, story of the universe, and that they can hold to it for centuries, sometimes longer. Honestly, it's not my area of specialty, but as an anthropologist, I endorse and respect your fascination with religion. Certainly, anthropologists have long been fascinated with religion. Mm-hmm. Some build their whole careers around comparative religious studies.
Look, I have this analogy that I love using to describe my biases against religion, my perspectives. So this is the analogy. You have like a high security prison.
Yep.
In the middle of the Pacific. All right. So in the middle of the ocean, high security prison, and there's like, you're there with a cellmate, and you want to fucking escape this prison. And the cellmate's like, what's wrong with you, Greg? If you literally manage to get past all the guards, jump into the fucking ocean, it's the scariest place you've ever been. Things will eat you, things will kill you. And you're like, no. There is a place that there are trees and there is joy and happiness and animals and kids laughing and playing in the sand. And your cellmate's like, no, that's not going to happen. Just stay here. They feed you. They give you a roof over your head. You get to watch TV. It's safe. It's good. Why would you want more? Like, what's wrong with you? Are you just like lusting for pleasure? But you are like, no, I know there is a world out there that's better than this fucking cell. And you jump into the ocean, and it's tough. You might drown, you might die, but if you don't, and if you make it to land, the world is fucking beautiful. The world is amazing.
So you're saying that you think that religion is like a prison?
Yeah. And to me, at least my personal journey of leaving religion is likened to the cellmate that jumps off the fucking boat.
And swims for it.
And seems like a maniac, and seems like a crazy person, seems like... Yeah.
I mean, look, from my personal perspective, I'm a recovered religious person as well. And so I share that. For me, breaking away from my parents' religion was like one of the most important formative experiences of my life, you know? But if you ask me, what's the prison we're in? It's not religion. It's capitalism.
Interesting.
And if we're in any kind of cell right now, it's that we think we have to sell our life an hour at a time to somebody else for it to be worthwhile. And I would say that most people's, not everybody, but a lot of people, certainly in Australia, I would say most people hold their religion kind of lightly. Never ever in the world. I come from the States, and in the U.S., there's plenty of people who are
evangelical
on the boat, man. They're well and truly on the boat, and they have no intention of going anywhere.
Wait, I'm curious. Have you had any experiences with like that level of like evangelical Christianity in the States?
You can't avoid it.
No,
you can't avoid it.
Because I see it in the movies, but I'm like, how nuts is it? Like 'cause when I think of crazy religion,
it is nuts.
Really.
The people outside the United States do not understand how close some parts of it are to Taliban levels of intolerance, of difference of opinion, and demand for adherence and belief. So I grew up around people like that. My family's Catholic, and we grew up in a very Catholic area, and they're very Catholic. And everybody around us was Catholic, and I went to Catholic grade school, and I went to Catholic high school, and
did you believe in, like, when you were going through the process, were you like,
I want to be a priest?
Oh, damn.
Yeah. Until I was about 15 or 16, for a long time I considered being a priest. And ironically, it was actually going to a Jesuit high school. And Jesuits are...
What's Jesuit? I don't know.
Okay. So Jesuit is an order of priests. And
okay.
They have a long history. They were actually part of the Inquisition.
Okay.
And the Counter-Reformation. So they were trained to be the kind of Pope's, I don't know, special forces of theology. So they're highly educated. They have a very, sometimes a tense relationship with the Pope historically, because sometimes the Pope would excommunicate a whole bunch of them.
Okay.
And they're highly educated, and they're very elitist. They focused on educating the leaders. So they were supposed to go, when they were founded, they were founded by a former soldier. They were supposed to go out and fight against Protestantism, but through theology and because most of your Catholic priors at that time were almost illiterate, if they weren't illiterate. And here the Protestants were having these theologians and these teachers and these religious leaders who were highly educated. So the Jesuits kind of had this history. So when I went to the Jesuits, I actually remember asking some of them, like, do you even believe in God? And they were sort of like, that's not a question that bothers me day in, day out. And it wasn't a kind of, there's a kind of, not just evangelical, Catholics can have it too, where there's a kind of like doctrinal, you must obey approach to religion. And then there's a different kind of approach to religion. And I actually found that the Jesuits were more on the side of seekers and thinkers than on the side of obeyers and, dogmatic.
But would you call them mystics or intellectuals?
Intellectuals. Yeah. In fact, that's I think one of the reasons I want to be a priest is I was. Oh, this is all right.
Let's do it.
Sorry, folks at home.
Let's do it.
We're already getting there, and I can't even blame it on beer or anything. Is when I grew up, I didn't see intellectuals around me. Most of the men that I knew when I was younger were lovely guys. Really, the dads were all, but they were dentists and accountants, and that bored the hell out of me. Everybody assumed because I was good at math, I was going to be an accountant, and I just could not imagine anything. My dad told tax stories over dinner.
Oh, no.
So it's the last thing I want to do is go into accountancy.
Yeah.
And I helped fix people's books. I think I remember in the summer, like balancing payrolls and stuff like that, just as like a summer job with my dad.
Jeez.
In an accounting firm. Not like seriously. I mean, just like picked up a few hours at work. So I really wanted to be an intellectual. I really loved reading. I loved fiction. I loved nonfiction. I loved science. I loved history. And the most intellectual people I met at the time were the Jesuit priests. They were literally the most well-educated. Most of them have 2 PhDs, or they've done a thesis in theology, but they've also done a lot of them have done another PhD as well.
Fascinating.
I thought this was what an educated person had to do. I thought you had to, take a vow of celibacy, join the order, and then you could like study and read all the time.
That's like hardcore intellectualism. It
was amazing. And
wow.
The high school I went to was all boys, and it was like super, selective. I think they took 95 percentile and above on standardized tests. That was it.
Wow.
And it was it fed directly into in fact, university felt very easy to me after high school because we read very serious books. I did Latin,
It was like theology based though, right?
But not, yes, but not, I can't, there's a difference. Like we didn't read the Bible and quote the Bible. I remember in high school, we read the Pope's teaching on just war, for example, in one of my classes, which was a discussion about under what grounds war could possibly be a moral good. And this was in light of the fact that we were, living through the Cold War and mutually assured destruction of nuclear weapons. So this was a serious philosophical, theological, moral debate about what is the nature of war? How could it ever be a good thing, given the U.S.'s history plus the condition? It's a serious philosophical question.
But I'm curious that, and maybe this is just, I don't know enough about religions, but I know particularly about Shia Islam in Iran. I was reading about the history recently, and it's like there was a huge clash with philosophy and mysticism where that just got absolutely banished in the 16th, 17th century. But you're saying, in this sphere of Christianity, it was
around. And I've watched the Catholic Church in the States, or at least my experience of it, become less and less like that. I mean, I taught at a Catholic university when I first got my first teaching job.
Yeah.
I taught at Notre Dame, which is outside Chicago, and I was the faculty moderator for Amnesty International. I hung out with all the lefty students. And, I taught a course on radical social theory, which a bunch of the, young Catholic workers got, and some of our former students went on to help organize tomato pickers in strikes against Taco Bell and, really interesting students, really left-leaning. But there was also a really big right-leaning student group. There were a bit like there was also the Marian Society, which was dedicated to Holy, the Mother Mary, and it was super anti, abortion, and that was the only thing they cared about. And to me, that was just the stupidest issue. And yet it motivated so much of what I was hearing in my neighborhood church and in the politics of Catholicism. But it wasn't what I had experienced at my high school, nor when I was teaching at Notre Dame.
Just stupidest issue, as in there's more important things to argue about, or.
Well, it's sort of like the Catholic obsession with masturbation.
Yeah.
It's like
doesn't matter.
Well, it doesn't matter on the one hand. On the other hand, it's like these are such these are personal things. Like, what is this institution with all of this money and all of this privilege and all this access doing, worrying about whether people are masturbating or not? Get out of the bedroom, you weirdos!
No, exactly.
And what is the Pope? He's taking a vow of celibacy. Shut up about abortion. There's a joke. Like the Italian one saying, play the game, make it the rules. This is how can you get involved in these things and make these central issues? How can 50-year-old, 60-year-old, Catholic middle class couples, in vaguely happy, unhappy marriages, talk about what should be the health care for a 19-year-old unmarried woman who finds herself pregnant? Butt out.
Yeah.
Pick a moral issue that actually impacts you. Pick a moral issue, a political moral issue that you actually have skin in the game. Stop pretending like this is the most important moral issue of your life. My mother, my father, my whole community was into that, and basically made me feel like they were all just focused on absolutely the wrong thing. They just and that leftist Catholic, that liberation theology, that Jesus was about poverty. Jesus, like the teachings of the Bible are about justice and about not being of the world, but recognizing the need for something more and brother and sisterhood. That I didn't see that in the Catholic Church. What I saw was more like it was Protestant. It was very individually focused. It was very much focused on an individual's relationship to God, and it was very judgmental. And I argue that that kind of. And when I went to Brazil later in my life, I ran into it again. The kind of politically engaged, progressive Catholic vision, not present. So that's why I fell out with religion.
But I'm curious. You said that's Protestant. Like, what do you mean? They're using the term Protestant, like negative connotation.
Yeah, because one of the things that look, there are closed-minded, judgmental people in every religion. And,
I can vouch for that.
Yeah, but some institutions do produce more of it. Some institutions make it their party line, and that kind of like self-satisfied. If you've made it, materially, God loves you. You can look down on anybody who's in worse circumstances. The only moral problems in society are things that don't affect you. They always affect other people, and you should be outraged about how they're behaving. Like getting worked up about somebody else's sexuality. It's like, no, that to me is a morality of condemning others, and I had a long in and out with organized religion, where I basically, every time I was around organized religion that was progressive and interesting, politically engaged, I sort of tracked towards it. And every time I was around the sanctimonious, judgmental, self-satisfied, middle class, we are God's people and everybody else is wrong, and we're just going to condemn them, and we're going to condemn anything we don't understand, and we're going to make their lives difficult. I just hated that. And so eventually I just realized that it's kind of like having an abusive partner. At a certain point, you just realize, there's good and there's bad, and it's not worth it. Yeah, I'm just walking out of the way. Whoa!
Whoops! All right, guys, I just spilled coffee, and that was unexpected. God bless Jesus.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
Don't rest carpet.
It was cold coffee. It was warm cold coffee. It's a little bit there. If I don't worry. Yeah.
So to me, that's my religious journey. Is that in the end, I'm still I think religions are fascinating. I think cosmology is fascinating, and so I think it makes complete sense to be fascinated by it. I think that the judgmentalness is just such a toxic influence, wherever it's coming from. It doesn't matter whether it's imams or popes or rabbis, that kind of our way is chosen, and then we're going to use the tools of whatever we have in our disposal, money, government, weapons to fix the world. No, you're not. You're just going to visit misery on somebody else.
No, I think, the religion theme I'm very interested in, but at the fear of creating an echo chamber, because anything you're going to say, I'm going to be like, fuck yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think the only thing I'm interested in is, there's two directions I think we can take this. Yep. One is your personal, if you have any personal stories of what was the first shock that took you out of religion. And the second part is to talk about wokeism, and if you think that's a thing, or if you think it's just a word that people throw around.
Wokeism. Okay, two very separate.
Yeah, so it literally depends what you're feeling.
Well, let's do both of them. Let's do first one. What was the big shock? First big shock was sex. Not first girlfriend. I won't give that away, but at some certain point in high school, realizing that all these people were nuts. That this was a great thing and amazing. So
you're saying the religious people were nuts for not having sex? Is that?
Well, for just making it into something it wasn't. Just making this sort of, oh God, I get so tired of it. There was probably a point in my life when I was going to church with my parents every Sunday, and I was going to church at the high school every Wednesday, and I was just like,
I've been there. I get that.
blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah blah. After a while, just like, so this first shock was realizing I think these people are crazy, and that just got worse the more I got away. So I moved out when I was 18, went away to university, and then it was just like, couldn't deal with it.
But it's like, I'm just curious because so just FYI,
Yeah.
listeners will know, maybe you don't know, my 3 favorite topics, just to talk about: religion, sex, and drugs. That's just FYI, just like that's kind of my thing. But
well, I think that so that's first thing. So that was first shock. I got so angry. I was so angry many times. I actually campaigned for Jimmy Carter, and when he was trying to get reelected against Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. And
so can you paint like a bit of a scene of what that was looking like?
I was still in grade school.
Because a lot of listeners will have no idea who even
two
of
let's
the
go through.
people
So Jimmy Carter was a deeply principled man from Georgia, Southern drawl. He kind of out of nowhere became the United States president. Sort of,
He's like Republican,
Democrat.
Okay.
And he was had his first term, and there was a huge problem because Iran had taken hostages during his presidency. And he was sort of seen. They'd held the embassy, and it was considered a scandal. And he was weak. He tried to send, or the U.S. government tried to send a rescue mission. It was a disaster. It failed. I can't remember where it was. Maybe in the Iraqi desert. The helicopters broke down. It was a total nightmare. And it turned out that behind the scenes, Ronald Reagan was promising the Iranian government that he would get them weapons if they held on until he got elected. So it turned out that
wait, is that actually got leaked?
Well, it's come to light that there was this whole sort of arms for hostages deal, and there was this sort of discussion about it. So Ronald Reagan, I hated Ronald Reagan. So and Ronald Reagan is sort of the model for the melding of conservative politics with the evangelical Christian movement. So this was the first. God, this would be so long ago. This would be like, I don't know, when was this? 1980. God.
Oh wow.
Might have been 12, maybe.
Yeah.
And even when I was, I just hated Ronald Reagan. I thought he was a clown. He was a TV actor.
But you were Christian back then. So
I was Catholic.
So you're Catholic, but you still didn't like him.
I hated him.
Interesting.
Didn't just dislike him. We had a debate, and I was the one who wanted to represent Carter in like grade school. And everybody else was going to vote for Reagan because he was the Catholics had given their endorsement. He was anti-abortion. You know, and so everybody made fun of me, and they tore down my signs, and they. And then when Reagan won, they all sort of had a big laugh. And to me, that was already like part of my break. God, I would have been in grade school still, middle school, something like that. Sorry, guys, I'm not remembering the years. I wasn't prepared for this.
No, that's so good.
I should have done my homework. I'm going to get busted for loss of memory. Anyway, so Reagan, I couldn't stand the way that, God, people loved Reagan. Oh, great America. And he did so much bad shit. And he brought down the Berlin Wall and ended bullshit. The crushing centralized economic system of the Soviet Union caused it to unravel. And he gave one speech, I just thought he was a bit of a actor who was more style than substance. So even back then I was sort of anti-right wing, anti-conservative politics, super progressive. And the fact that my church and the people around me were all super Reagan, it drove a wedge.
Because it's interesting, because you're saying age of 15, 16, you said was the first shock, but there's like
There's an earlier. Yeah, I guess I already felt estranged even in middle school from the culture around me. And ironically, it was also, I was playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons back then.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I was doing a lot of cultural research because I was the dungeon master. So I was the one who designed the worlds. And I was doing research into ancient Egypt. And I was doing, I remember 8th grade, I wrote a report on the Battle of Lepanto, the last great naval battle between galleys, because I was fascinated by galleys. And
interesting.
Weird, super nerdy.
Oh, that's very nerdy. Yeah.
Super nerdy. But also interested in other cultures, really interested in other cultures. And I was in a very lily-white, homogeneous area of St. Louis, which is an incredibly segregated city. St. Louis is one of the most racially segregated cities in the States.
And back then, it would have been nuts.
Well, it was like, this is a place where you probably heard about, like, some of the race riots in the U.S.
Yeah.
And that some of those happened in St. Louis. And the city was notoriously divided. East St. Louis was almost entirely black, African American. Where I was living with my family in the western suburbs were almost entirely white. Virtually no cultural diversity. These were folks who intentionally chose communities where they knew there would be nobody who wasn't like them. They loved that everybody on the street went to the Catholic Church. That was like a major accomplishment.
And like, and tell me if this is too personal, but like, did you see anything like fucked up with your own eyes, like as a result of the segregation?
That's a good question. Not really, not firsthand. No, it wouldn't be till later. I mean, I remember flying home to visit my parents one year, and they almost canceled my trip from Macquarie because I was flying back, and the neighborhood right by the airport in St. Louis was on fire because of protests around the death of a young man at the hands of the police.
Yeah, wow.
And this was like, you hear about this.
Yeah.
Of course, I flew to Australia right after the Bondi riots. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, I didn't see it firsthand. That's the thing about segregation is, if you live in the majority area, if you live in the wealthy area, it's intentionally designed so that you will never see the actual place where the machine of the police and the state come to bear on the people who are excluded. It makes them invisible. So, and in my parents' defense, they do so much work. Like, my mother and father have done. They go to a shelter and they go to work at a food pantry every week. Like, they're some of the most. My father donates so much blood; he's got like a special license plate on his car. They are deeply enmeshed in their community, and they're very principled people, but they're also very enclaved people. And that was the part that chafed.
Enclave.
Like, they want to be around people like them.
Yeah. Okay.
People like them. So I'm kind of the black sheep, the weirdo who, like, first of all ran off to the East Coast, then moved all over the United States, then moved down to Brazil, then eventually moved to Australia. I've got a Chinese wife. Like, my parents, I just don't compute.
See, like that's and that is, I love how it took this long into the episode to tell the listeners why I think Greg is particularly good to talk about things like even capitalism and wokeism. It's just, you've had such a, like, you're enmeshed in this conservative culture, but then also you've seen so many things, and you're also quite progressive. And I think that I've talked to a few people on the podcast and in my own life, and this is a topic, at least in the States right now. Like, I was in the States a few months ago, hugely divisive. And some people will say, some people are progressives, and they'll say, wokeism is a problem. Some people will say, wokeism, what the fuck is wokeism? Like, so I'm
in the later camp a bit.
Yeah.
Look, this is not a new playbook. I mean, political correctness was the great enemy, in the Rush Limbaugh age in the United States. Rush Limbaugh was a shock jock, a radio personality who...
Kind of like Alex Jones type of thing?
If Alex Jones was truly unhinged and off the rails.
Wow.
Trump gave him the Congressional Medal of Honor. Like, he arguably, to Limbaugh, Rush Limbaugh arguably was the battering ram that set up the grounds for Trumpism.
Really?
Just day after day spewing anti-feminist, anti-gay, anti-immigrant. Just hours of broadcasts.
Rush Limbaugh.
He was the most successful radio talk show host in the United States. There were radios carrying his show across all the United States, including parts that, like, even mainstream television was just not reaching. Like, turn on your car, AM radio, Rush Limbaugh is there. If you're a pickup truck in the middle of Oklahoma, there's no reception, you still get Rush Limbaugh. And he's just spewing anti-immigrant, anti-communist, anti-wokeism, although he didn't use that term, that's a new term.
It's a new term, yeah.
Back in his day, it was political correctness. And he would just bash feminists, He would get some poor feminist would be testifying and say something that he wanted to mock, and he would not let it go for days. Like a one-liner in a congressional testimony would turn into days of being pilloried by right-wing radio. You know, and that's what I would like. To me, progressivism is always going to have a tendency towards experimentation, sometimes saying stuff that comes out a bit daffy. Sometimes 10 years, 5 years, 10 years later, what seemed insane actually turns out to be right. You know, some of the stuff on, for example, transgenderedness 10 years ago was just like mocked.
Yeah.
Mocked. And now we realize, like, it's not a big deal. We need to accept people where they're at. We need to reach out to those who are distressed. And some of them are having really intense issues around their gender, their sexuality. You know, we know that the kids most likely to be, you know, self-harm or to engage in risky behavior are often kids who are going through various problems, whether that be trying to reconcile their sense of who they are, gender, sex. Like, to me, it's just compassion, you know? Even the bullies sometimes need compassion. Sometimes the reason they're bullies is because at home they're dealing with substance abuse in their houses. And they're going to school and, you know. Anyway, so is wokeism thing? I don't fucking care about wokeism, honestly. I don't fucking care.
Nice.
You know, like, you want me to call me by different pronouns? I'll do my best. I might forget. I'm an old guy. I forget, but I'll fucking do my best because I want you to feel welcome. You know, if you don't like Sam, you like Samim. I'm going to do my absolute best. All right, all right.
Yeah.
You know, it's not Bob, so it's a little bit stretching, but you know, like my poor wife trying to say my name, Greg, to a Chinese person is like. You know, there's an R, there's a consonant at the end. Like, how do you deal with that, you know? So I just think maybe because I've lived places where I wasn't in the majority. I lived in Brazil, you know? Nobody could pronounce my name. You know, I was weird to everybody there. So I think when I'm in the majority, I want to be welcoming.
Because I want to go into that, like, how did Brazil, like, where were you at before Brazil and how did Brazil change you?
All right, we're jumping around a little bit.
Yeah.
So I went to university, thought I was going to be a lawyer. Thought I was going to do international law, business law. At the time, Japan was going to be the great rival to the United States. So I was learning Japanese, doing pre-law, because at university you can't do a law degree in the States. You do a pre-law and then you go into law school.
I'm trying to paint a picture. So we got like 12-year-old Greg is kind of like he likes Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
And then 15, 16 is like, ooh, sex, interesting.
Yeah.
And then
go to university.
And then now you're going to university, but are you still are you full into the progressive sphere now?
No, I'm super high achieving.
Okay.
I'm doing really well. I got scholarship offers, and my father had lost his job economically. My family had a bit of a rough time. So I had gotten into all these really prestigious universities, but because financial aid was based on your family's income, and my family's income had just gone from being very good to being not good, I could no longer afford what the models said we should be able to afford. So I had gotten into Columbia University, University of Chicago, Johns Hopkins, and they were all too expensive. So I went to the University of Virginia. So I definitely felt, when I went to university, I felt the need to provide for myself. I felt very strongly that I had to take the burden off my parents of caring for me. I had to get work. So between my second and third year, I was a door-to-door salesman because I needed to earn more money to help pay for my education and pay for my living expenses.
So like, how did that compute mentally? Because when I think of myself, I'm like, refugee family.
Yeah.
Working for yourself is just in my DNA since I was a kid. So coming from it sounds like a well-established white family.
Yeah.
How did you what happened mentally?
Well, I'm Gen X.
Yeah.
So Gen X kind of always assumes that the bottom's going to fall out.
Yeah.
We grew up assuming that we're going to face nuclear winter. You know, like, I always assumed that any false step, I'm going to wind up living in the basement of my parents' house, working at Kinko's, making photocopies.
So it's like your age demographic used to had a similar mentality?
Definitely. I felt like I was precarious. I mean, we're the ones who made Pearl Jam and Nirvana, you know. Like, those are my people. We felt like we were gonna get fucked. You know, the good times were over. Reagan had taught us that, like, the government is screwed. It's controlled by corporations. So I went to I kind of always assumed I'd have to take care of myself, but I thought, I got to do it now.
Okay, so you got the door-to-door salesman job.
I'm working in the summers, door-to-door, selling books, going to Wisconsin, going to New Mexico, seeing amazing cultural diversity, you know, in my summers, when going back to university. And then I took an anthropology class my second year, and it just blew my mind. I was like the second week, and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You can do this as a job? Like, I don't have to be a lawyer to make a good life and take care of people. I could actually get a job doing something I care about.
But can you, like, just for listeners that might not know, like, anthropology?
Yeah.
What is that?
Anthropology is the study of it's a study of human diversity. And I was especially interested in cultural diversity. So I went into a class, I still remember it to this day. Richard Handler was my professor. He's still a friend of mine.
Yeah.
He's at University of Virginia, where I was. And it was a course on society, deviance, society and the individual. So on deviance, which is kind of like, you know, how societies define different things as deviant. And one of the first topics we dealt with were things like, we read a book about a herding group that people associate their identity with their cows. And, you know, so what's deviant in this society? It's not, you know, it's totally different than a Western capitalist American understanding. We read a book about a society in which it was expected that young men would go through a phase of same-sex sexual activity before they eventually got a wife or a female partner and had children. So it was assumed that you go through different sexualities at different stages of life. And this blew my mind. Okay, we're reading these anthropologies of societies where what's deviant is very different than and I'm like, this is true. I can see this. Outside this Catholic world, these people are crazy. They're condemning stuff. It's just their culture. Anthropology is showing me that there's other ways of being human. 19 and that just like rips off. And I'm already listening to African music. I'm really interested in West African, South African music. I'm really interested in culture. I've been doing Dungeons and Dragons, and finally, here's an academic discipline that is doing the same thing. It's about learning about other ways of living.
And one thing I'm curious about here is, I had a similar experience in the sense that I think that there's a certain age, maybe 18, 19, maybe early 20s, where especially once you've especially something like religion, it's been your foundation and your universe for your whole life. And especially if you're in a void around the age of 18, I just think you're just super seeking something to just grab and make yours.
Oh, totally. Like, at that time I joined a fraternity house. So,
and that's common in the States? Do you have to?
Well, no, you don't have to. It's common in Southern universities. I actually joined the drug house.
Nice.
But I also did in part because I did the math and I realized that it was actually cheaper to live in the fraternity house and to be on the meal plan than it was virtually any other living arrangement I could find. So it was the cheapest way that I could live near the university, and I enjoyed it. And I was partying really hard.
Well, so I'm curious, and you don't need to actually admit to doing. You don't have to admit to doing any drugs, but I'm just wondering, like, what year is this? Like 90s?
88, 89.
90s. So what? I'm just curious. And once again, Greg he didn't do any drugs, but what drugs are people doing in the 90s?
Well,
in America,
in America, there was a lot of pot on campus, a lot of marijuana being smoked. I mean, that was always present at every social event. You could get a ton of alcohol. Alcohol was the drug of choice.
Alcohol,
and not healthy alcohol intake, like serious binge drinking. And I hadn't drank at all in high school. So when I went to university, I think the second weekend I was there, I got so drunk I fell down on a basketball court and basically gave myself horrible road burn on the side of my face.
Wow.
Just like week 2, classes had barely started and I've already gotten so drunk I basically, marred my face for the first 2 weeks.
One thing I never understand is how do people have that experience and also a deeply intellectual experience? Like,
I can just say, the only thing I can tell you is there are lots of places where this happens. That the idea that which I had, intellectual life was a life of renunciation, no alcohol, no relationships, Jesuits, priests.
No, yeah.
Now I'm like, no, intellectual life is like getting totally stoned, baked out of your, and then having a serious discussion while, Pink Floyd is on repeat in the background. So we did a lot of mushrooms in the house. We did a lot of pot. There was some cocaine floating around. It wasn't really my thing. But like, yeah, we did a lot of stuff.
And just
There was some LSD. I don't really have a lot of experience with LSD, but I have a lot of experience co-piloting with LSD.
co-piloting.
Being around people who are on LSD and hanging with them and talking. And I mean, I was taking classes at the same time. So I took an amazing class with a guy named Roy Wagner, a very famous anthropologist out there. And he was teaching a course on Don Juan and Carlos Castaneda. So it was the Carlos Castaneda books, which are kind of like these classic anthropology books, which you can't tell if they actually happened or not. It's about this anthropologist who meets a shaman from the like Sonoran Desert, and he goes on all these journeys, and he becomes it's very unclear whether he actually had these experiences or whether he was just completely stoned or made it up. But we read the whole books as though they were real, and then I remember writing papers about Don Juan while I was getting completely drunk, partying like crazy on the weekend, and staying on the dean's list, which was the sort of intellectual elite. For us, it was normal. They weren't in competition.
It was,
Like being embedded in the university, deeply committed, meant partying like crazy, getting up early, studying, acing your exams. You've got to stay in good academic standing, because otherwise you get kicked out of the house, the fraternity house. And you want to be in the fraternity house because that's where the parties are happening. And the fraternity house I was in was not, like, I had a girlfriend who I would go on to have, I think, probably almost like a kind of, we were together for 7 years.
Wow.
And we met while I was in the fraternity, and she would just come stay at the fraternity house. It wasn't the kind of, horrible thing you see in, there was hazing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the kind of, well, I shouldn't say that. There were problems back in the 80s.
What's hazing, sir? I don't know.
Hazing is like making the new members do.
I've seen it in the movies.
Do rough shit.
Do weird shit.
Yeah, and God, the pledges hated me because I would do the hazing with them to show what pussies they were. I was like,
see, it's such an interesting culture. But what I'm particularly interested about is how much did your experiences with these drugs or this partying, how much did it shape your trajectory? Like, did it shape it at all, or was it just like a helpless fun on the side?
It's funny. Some of the guys I was in the fraternity house with, have gone on to become professors. I know several others. One of them's even a prominent professor in sort of Buddhist studies / consciousness studies. And some of them, one guy we just sent money to, he's homeless, essentially. So I think it was a high risk environment. People had breakdowns. They failed out. They couldn't handle it. Other folks had truly, I think the biggest thing for me is that it shattered the idea that I had to follow in the tracks of the people in my community who just went from being the son of a dentist to being a dentist.
So that was a common theme
in my upbringing. That was, whatever, like, oh, he became a lawyer instead of a dentist. Oh my God, wow. And he's living 20 minutes from his parents. Oh wow, it's a different neighborhood. Like when I went and lived in Brazil, learned languages, that just didn't compute. Like I joke two things. First of all, my whole family still lives in the States except me. They all live within,
same place.
Just about.
Yeah.
Just two different. But the other thing too is I joke that I've had 2 more divorces than the rest of my family combined. Like the level of risk that I became willing to take on was way above the level of risk and the level of like disruption, new environments. I love my family, but I did not play it safe. I took huge gambles, and I could have wound up like the poor guy who's, trying to get out of his car, living in his car.
See, and this is where, just so the listeners are on board and you're also on board.
Yeah.
I'm keeping this theme of going through different milestones of your life.
Yeah.
But when we find something interesting, we're just going to pause we're going to pause the chronological order and then just come back to it.
Sure.
So I want to come back to doing law school just before you go to Brazil.
Yeah.
But one thing I find fascinating is risk tolerance, because this is something that I've been reflecting about. Is so just so you know, Greg, like I was extremely religious till I was 18.
Yep.
Moved to Sydney and COVID happened, so didn't really make too much progress from the age of like 18 to 20, 21.
Yeah.
And then beginning of last year, I was 21, I met this guy called Maz.
Yeah.
And we hit it off and we started a podcast. And literally, season 1 of the podcast, which is not on Spotify at the moment, it literally shows the trajectory of our friendship. So we've had a podcast from the beginning of our friendship to now.
That's wild.
Which is really cool.
That's very cool.
And it shows all of the thought progressions.
Yeah,
and
wow.
It's fascinating. But the thing is, for me, my friendship with Maz and other things in life,
Yeah.
I have gone from a very, very relatively conservative, safe. I've always been known since I was a kid as being responsible,
Yeah.
smart. Like everyone in the family is like, look at Samim, like he's
Model kid.
a model kid. Like, and I was always like, did everything to get praise from my dad, always pleasing my parents. And now I've gone on this fast track fucking life trajectory, traveling solo. I've gone on multiple solo travels around the world, experimenting with plant medicines.
Say no more.
Say no more. Just exploring these different ideas, even in the realm of sexuality. I guess I've just been more curious.
Yeah.
And there's like this deep drive, which I'm sure you can resonate with, but something happened a few weeks ago, and I'm not going to go into the details, but it made me reflect for a second and say, I am taking a lot of risks. Like, I'm living as though I have fucking 8 lives.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I hear you, man.
like, I don't know, it feels like it feels like I'm doing the right thing, but it also feels like I'm just a stupid young person with like my prefrontal lobes undeveloped.
Well, no, I think. Look, I share that sense of like, I just think, it's funny because day to day, I don't think of myself as a risk taker. Like I don't have risky hobbies. Like I had a friend who was like into like, I don't know, going into abandoned buildings and like going into abandoned industrial sites. I was like, what are you doing? That's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And but I sort of like I because of my principles and my curiosity, I commit to things that I later think, holy fuck, why did I commit to this? So I remember being scared out of my mind when I was getting ready to go to field work. By myself to a country where they didn't speak a lot of English. I wasn't going as a tourist. I was going, first time I went to Brazil was 3 months, with a backpack. And I got to go see if I can make a project there. And the price of failure is I don't get this degree that I've gone away to get my doctorate, my master's, my doctorate. And it scared the hell out of me. And I remember 2 days before I left, breaking up with my girlfriend, just saying like, I gotta, no, not the first time, sorry. It was the second time I did that. But I just remember both times the second time I went away for 1.5 years and I broke up with my girlfriend before I left. I just thought like, I don't know what's going to happen. But I've done those things multiple times. Like, same thing with getting married, same thing with coming to Australia. Like in every case, people looked at me and went, whoa, what are you doing? And I almost felt like I couldn't look down. If I looked down, I would freak out. Like you're standing on a high place.
Yeah.
Like, don't look down. There were many times in my life I had been like, don't look down. But you believe in this enough to set this up as your goal. You've committed to this. Go. Like you're standing on the edge of the airplane. You're having second thoughts about jumping out. Go. And I think there is a difference between people who will tolerate those high. It's not just people think of risks as like, I don't know, bungee jumping. To me, that's stupid. Maybe it's cool for some folks, but like there's not that much to be gained from it except like photos, or Whereas something like plant medicine or going and moving to another culture, or these are big things where there's a lot to be gained. For me, it was freedom from that place, which was so stultifying, where everything seemed to be preordained. I was going to meet a woman like my mother and marry her and have kids like me, and I was going to go to the same church, and then we'd have the same holidays, and I would look like my father and this, at the same age, and just saying, no, I don't want to do that. I sort of turning life, grabbing the wheel and and going off road, and once you go off road, you build up a kind of tolerance for risks. And I think over time I got better with taking big risks.
It's like tolerance for risk is interesting, because I was talking with a friend the other day, and she was considering just packing her shit and just moving to Europe. Yeah, and she'd never done anything to this extent before, and I was just talking, and she's like, I don't know, like I'm scared, like what if, and there was many what ifs, like what if I miss coming back, what if I, and all of these things. And what I said to her was, at least for me, it's kind of like I brought it back to like basic conditioning experiments, where I'm like, if you take a risk and get rewarded, take a risk, get rewarded, take a risk, get rewarded. Eventually, taking a risk, it's not that scary, because in your brain you're like, fuck, there's 10 times I took a risk. It was amazing. So did you experience that in the sense of...
I don't get off on the risk. I look at the reward, you know. I mean, if I was in this situation, I would say, you know, why do you want to go to Europe? What's there? And focus on that. You know, why do you want to go to Brazil? What's there? Don't focus on the risk. You know, I mean, I've had guns emptied at me. You know, I've had people shoot at me. I've had violent crime. I've had my heart broken multiple times. You know, but I've also swum with whales off Tonga. I've danced in possession ceremonies in Brazil. I've been to, I don't know, 30 some odd countries. I took cooking classes in Vietnam. I met an amazing woman in Chengdu. I climbed the holy Buddhist mountain in the fog and had an out-of-body experience. You know, like I learned capoeira from some of the greatest masters of the art. You know, I've also had a lot of like career success. So to me, it's not, don't get off on the risk. I think if you get off on the risk, you get addicted to the risk taking. I'm not addicted to the risk taking. I'm addicted to the big gambles, the big changes. Like, this is what I really want, and I'm not going to let something stop me.
See, like, I don't quite get that distinction. Like, I feel like you're onto something.
I don't look down. That's the thing. Don't look down. Don't what if. Don't what if. Say what if not. You know, like what's to be gained here? What am I going for? And I think that's the key. When I, you know, picked up and moved to Australia, people were freaked out. I was giving up a job at one of the best universities in the United States, like gold-plated. Notre Dame is gold-plated, wealthy as F.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're going to this university we never heard of, Macquarie University, Sydney, Australia. You've never been to Australia. What are you doing? You quit your job, you know?
Yeah.
You're not a citizen. You know, you don't have work rights. You've already put in your like letter of resignation. Like, no, I feel something. I want something different. I want a different kind of life. I don't want to live in the United States. I don't like it here. You know, I don't like the compromises I'm being forced to make. And, you know, instead of thinking about everything can go wrong, think about like, what do I get out of this? You know? And I think you can, you know, look, you can, I don't know, man, you can fall out of balance anyway. But to me, I have been scared out of my mind sometimes when I'm getting ready to take the jump, you know? Like I said, I remember sitting there with my bag packed to go to Brazil thinking, what am I doing? You know, what am I doing? Especially the second time when I'd committed to like being there for a year. You know, like I said, broke up with my girlfriend, committed to being there for a year, like, and then when I got there, second weekend, somebody broke my arm for me in a capoeira class, you know, like.
What's capoeira? Can you...
Oh, yeah.
I have no idea what that is.
Capoeira is an Afro-Brazilian martial art. It's, if you ever played some of the video games, there's a guy who's, Eddie Bravo, I think, who does cartwheels and spinning kicks. It's a martial art, musical martial art. It's one of the most elaborate African diaspora martial arts. And I went there to do my PhD research. And I went to Salvador, which is like the New Orleans of Brazil. So like intensely vibrant culturally, music everywhere, dancing everywhere, like amazing food, African style cuisine, like I said, possession ceremonies. And I was doing capoeira. Like it was, you know, looking back on it, it was high risk, but it was also just high return. I mean, I had a year and a half of my life, because I ended up staying about 18 months, where I was just totally devoted to learning a martial art, everything about it, so I could write a thesis on it. Wrote a 500-page thesis on capoeira.
Yeah, wow.
And by the end, I was lecturing at the local university in Portuguese.
Wow.
From not speaking Portuguese when I started my graduate career to lecturing at the university before I even got my PhD.
Sweet.
You know, that was a really amazing. And again, like, I looked at what I could gain, and I focused on that, and it ended up being even more than that. And same thing with coming to Australia, or, you know, I focused on what I could gain, and it's even more than what I thought.
See, I think this particularly is a perfect point to have an intermission.
Yeah.
And then when we come back, I really want to go deep into Brazil.
Brazil. Yeah. Oh,
What do
I'm
you
talking
think?
about Brazil.
Done?
Amazing place.
Fucking fuck. Let's go. Go do meditation. Go do
Like, so
meditation.
red. I was like, man, she's not gonna be able to sit down for masturbation.
Before we wrap up, I want to get my religious frustration out. I wasn't empathizing with Hitler. Fucking fuck.
Anything you wanna do, you can.
Be a professor. Wink, wink.
Really, you spent too much time on Pornhub.